What's going on, you guys? Uncle Jesse here. This is Thor. More specifically, Thor from Avengers Infinity War. And even more specific than that, this is the first 3D printed statue that I've ever run off and painted. Let's check it out. Alright, I started things off by printing this on the Artillery Sidewinder 3D printer. This was going to be my test print that I'd be using for painting. Printed this at 0.2mm layer height and it came out pretty nice. I then printed a much more highly detailed version on the Zortrax Inkspire Resin 3D printer and the Zortrax Gray Resin. The detail on this is just absolutely stunning. I then let it sit in a bath of IPA or isopropanol alcohol for about 3 minutes to help clear off any loose resin. Then let it air dry, and again, the results are just beautiful, absolutely beautiful. I also printed some of the lightning bolts here in Zyltech blue, and this stuff is the perfect clear consistency that I was going for. Then I had the pleasure of trying to very carefully remove all the supports from the lightning bolts. Took my sweet time doing this, and I think it came out really nice. Then remove the supports from Thor himself, which just very easily snaps off. But after removing some of those supports, you end up with little divots or marks, and I just used a little bit of sandpaper to help sand that away once it was cured by sitting it in the sun. I also used some Rust-Oleum automotive primer and applied one very thin coat across all of the props. This is going to be the base layer before I apply any paints to them. Alright, now it's time to apply some of these paints. I'm using some Citadel paints. These are primarily used for these little miniature models, but I figured to be able to use the same technique here for these statues. I also busted out my airbrush and applied some flat black paint across all of the prints here, and you'll notice I have 3 of them, one being the test print. One of these I painted completely black, while the other I have painted everything except for the head. That's the one that I'll be painting the flesh tones with. So here again, I'm applying some of these Citadel paints, and it's all about layering, so I'm going to be using a variety of different paints. Huge shout out to Miniac over on YouTube. I watched a ton of his videos on painting miniatures and really just followed some of the guides that he had there and just sort of scaled it up a bit in terms of painting it on one of these statues. I think having a test print here really helped me just feel a little bit more comfortable before applying the paints to the actual finished piece. So I would go through and apply some paints to the actual test print, let it see how it goes, and then apply it to the actual. Here I'm using some rub and buff on the one that I painted entirely black. This one was my sort of fallback model. If everything looked really bad, I'd be able to fall back on one of these prints here and show you guys some of the rub and buff statued version. This stuff's incredibly easy to work with. Just a little dab will do, and just rub and buff it on, and it'll really pick up all the high spots on your print, and you'll see the black undertones below it. So here again, I'm applying some more of those skin details and highlights. Again, this is just really specifically all about layering. This is also my desk area. I don't typically do a lot of videos over here, so I'll have to figure out a better setup in the future if I continue to do some of these paint style videos. Maybe I'll do a little bit more in-depth tutorial here with how I go about doing this. Again, this was really just a lot of playing around and seeing what worked. I used, I feel like about 10 different paints and paint combinations there to get a lot of the skin tones that I was going for. So there are a lot of good tutorial videos online about how to paint these miniatures using, I think it's 3 or 4 different base paints or different varieties of paints, and I sort of took it to an extreme by adding in a lot of additional paints since I really wanted to get as close to the variety of flesh as I could. So here I'm attempting to paint Thor's eye nice and blue, getting in there very, very carefully with a very highly detailed brush there, and I think the results were really good. It's starting to really come together at this point, and I'm starting to be very happy with the results that I'm getting. So here I'm now going to be painting the eye patch, again using a very small detailed brush, getting in there very, very carefully and painting and trying to make sure not to actually paint on any of the face, and really just taking my time with getting into all the small details of painting the eye patch. I also needed to get in there and paint some very, very faint details in gold where the lines are, and I actually screwed up part of this and painted over the little divots, and thankfully I was able to just use a little bit more black paint and paint back over that. So here and now I've taped off the entire statue, and I want to paint everything in red and airbrush. I initially looked into painting this with just a hand brush, but wanted the even consistency that an airbrush will bring. And let me just say the Iawata new airbrush that I have is absolutely amazing. I'll probably be doing a follow-up video on this. It's just a huge step up compared to my old kit. All right, now let's get this thing assembled and show it off. All right, and here is the finished result. I think this turned out pretty dang nice for my first attempt at really hand painting flesh tones on, more specifically on a 3D printed statue. This file was created by Fotis Mints and is part of his new Patreon. I'll have links down below to that. This guy makes some ridiculously cool models. He does also have a free variation of this file that's available on My Mini Factory. I'll have links to both his Patreon and My Mini Factory. The free variation is what I printed over on the artillery Sidewinder and what I used as my test model for a lot of the paint applications. I ended up printing 2 of these same files. I knew I wanted to paint one as close as possible as I could to the actual movie, and the other I really wanted to go with this black and silver aged statue look, along with some bronzing there for the eyepiece, which I think turned out really cool. But I'm very, very happy with how my first attempt at painting the face turned out. I mean, it was just lots and lots and lots of layering of these different paints, and obviously the airbrush came in handy for putting down a lot of the base tones here for the body and as well for the cape to make sure everything looked uniform after I laid that down. I should mention that I did try hollowing out some of these and sticking some LEDs on the inside. Unfortunately, I just don't think my LEDs are powerful enough because the light would just emit from the little holes and wouldn't necessarily shine through the lightning bolts themselves. All in all, this is a super cool file, and I really recommend you supporting this amazing artist. He has delivered so many free and amazing files for everybody over on My Mini Factory. I'll have links to his account there again, and as well to his Patreon. Super excited that he allowed me to print this as part of that kickoff campaign of his, and absolutely loving this. I think you guys know how much of a big fan I am of Thor, how much he's won me over the years, especially from Ragnarok on, has just really sort of taken on a whole new life, and absolutely loving this. I wouldn't mind actually seeing another third variation based on Endgame, but that's something else entirely here. I just want to say thanks again for watching, you guys. Hopefully you enjoy this. Hopefully we'll be doing some more of these type of paint sessions here and sharing with you guys. I'm really digging it. I picked up a lot of those model paints for miniatures, but figured that would be just fine to be applying to this and using those same techniques of layering and layering and more layering until I get things correct. And I still think there's some things that I could do to improve on the face and painting of the different tones and the highlights, but for my first attempt, I think it came out pretty good. I'm pretty happy with this and wouldn't mind leaving this over here on the shelf. I actually might stick this over on my work desk just so it's front and center. I'm slightly really digging how this turned out. I just want to say thanks again for watching, guys. Let me know down in the comments what you thought of my first paint attempt here, my first paint application on a statue, painting some flesh tones here, opposed to just painting some replica props. And also, I'll be doing a follow-up video on my new airbrush. I'm really digging that. It's a huge step up compared to the kit version that I picked up from Harbor Freight. So more to come on that as I continue to play with that and get better control and usage of the new airbrush. All right, you guys, thanks again for watching. I'll see you next time. Bye now. I really dig how simple it is to do these rub and buff paint jobs for either props or statues or whatever it is that you might be printing. I'll probably be doing some follow-up videos on this as well, just because it's so enjoyable and fun to do.